So, hello, Jessica.
Hi.
It's good to be here with you in your apartment in Lower Manhattan. And I'm looking forward to hopefully a great conversation.
And you should also slate it. It's June 15th, 2025.
Indeed. So, you are an experienced radio operator from your previous career, so you know all of these details.
I know a few of these details.
Yeah, looking back to our friendship, I think we met around 2018, 2017.
Earlier. Didn't you become a citizen in
Oh,
earlier
in
than that?
2017.
So we'd known each other for a while before that.
Yeah.
When did you, it was several years before you left, you were in the psych department.
I was in the psychology department at Columbia.
When
yeah.
were you there?
I left the psychology department in October 2017. So probably a year and a half before then. So early 2016, maybe.
That's more like when we probably met.
Yeah. Maybe during the first Trump campaign.
I don't even know. But anyway, it's been quite a few years.
Yeah, and
you were a teenager.
Much younger than now, yes. And much more green in a way. One of the topics, and I'm curious if you feel like exploring this, might be, and we've talked about this on a number of occasions, difficulty with keeping friends who disagree on, some very dear to heart topics. But I don't know if this is maybe cutting a bit too deep.
No, you can ask me.
Yeah.
You can ask me anything you want.
So
I'm not promising to answer everything, but don't. No, but ask anything you want.
I'm curious if you want to start just with describing maybe not one specific person, but really your general experience of what has happened with some friends that were dear to you, and go into as little or much detail, and then maybe we can look at specific features of that experience.
Well, a number of my friends have deserted me in recent years, including a number of people whom I've known for a very long time. And their objections seem to be to my politics. I'm on the right, which is, I don't meet very many people on the right in my daily life. I live in Lower Manhattan, and I spent much of my career at Columbia University and a few other places that were pretty left-wing. My early career was at WBAI-FM, a violently left-wing radio station. I shouldn't say violently, since they're theoretically a pacifist organization, but and as you know, one of my claims to fame is I think I'm very likely the only person who has ever been fired from both WBAI and National Review. So I'm unpopular all over the place.
The word that stands out to me that you started with is where you said friends have deserted you. And not to get maybe into the emotional aspect so much, but I assume that they have treated you in a way, that left you with that impression. And so I'm curious if there's specific things that they either said or have done or haven't done that you would have wanted, as your friends, you would have wanted them to do. And if you can point to just a few of those things that they have done or not done that gave you that impression that they deserted you.
Well, some of them have been quite specific that they didn't want to talk to me anymore. Others have not said anything that specific, but have simply neglected to call or make any effort to see me. People who are still, in theory, speaking to me, but just, who have not told me to get out of their lives or anything, but have just neglected to keep me in their lives. In some of those cases, I think it really is about politics. In other cases, I think it's been politics was the excuse for wanting to drop an acquaintance that they needed an excuse for. It's much of it has been puzzling to me because I have been a conservative and I've been pretty open about it since the early 80s. So some of these people apparently weren't bothered by my being a conservative for the first 20 or 25 years I was one. And then mostly since 2016, they decided that it was intolerable and they couldn't stand to have right-leaning friends anymore. I don't know what they would say if you asked them the reasons for dropping me, but one of those people did. There was a specific moment in August 2016 where she told me in so many words that if I couldn't assure her I was going to vote for Mrs. Clinton, then she and I couldn't be friends anymore. That was one of the more, I can pinpoint the day that happened. But someone else whom I considered my best friend for much of my life, started sort of drifting away from me maybe 20 years ago in ways I didn't fully recognize at the time, and just kept drifting farther and farther away until it got to the point this spring where this is someone who spends much of her time on the West Coast, and when she was back in New York, she has simply neglected to call. But she was phasing out the friendship by degrees for a long time. And in fact, the last time I heard from her, she just, in the last week or two, she made excuses about how she'd been very busy and so forth, and she kind of implied that she would have called me if she hadn't been so busy, but she didn't come out and say that because it isn't true, and she's not dishonest enough to have gone all the way and claimed that she wished she had time to call me, because she did have time to call me and she didn't want to.
For me, there's three directions in which I can easily see myself now going in this conversation. One is to stay with your experience, if you would like to explore that further. One is, what is maybe one specific, or what is the individual experience of someone who has treated you in this way and why they may have done it from their perspective. And the third direction is, what are maybe some wider cultural factors that have created an environment in which people may feel just more inclined to drop friends over political disagreements, not because of their individual feelings, but just because the culture makes it almost a requirement, if you want to belong to a certain group, to publicly declare people who I disagree with on this just cannot be my friends. And is there any of these three aspects that you feel most interested in?
Well, I could talk about any of them, but I think the way you just put it, that's it. They can't be in their group if they have embarrassing friends. And I've become an embarrassing friend. One person who was never a terribly close friend, but was a friend since we were in college. There was sort of a dramatic ending to the friendship in October of 2016, where, I mean, this is someone who lives in California, whom I didn't see very often. But this person had always been quite diligent about keeping up old friendships, keeping in touch with people. He was the person who would call his friends on the East Coast every few months and catch up with them, that kind of thing. So someone who had made it clear that he did value old friendships, partly just because they were old friendships. But it was in the lead up to the 2016 election, and I was going to California, and I had been invited to stay with him and his wife. Before, when I was planning the trip, he told me that he was going to have a debate watch party, and I absolutely could not be there for that, and I had to time my arrival after that event. So already it was clear that he would be very embarrassed if there had been a Republican on the premises during their debate watch party. But, I mean, he was the host. I didn't argue with that. And I came out and did stay with these people for a couple of days. And then we got into a big argument. And that was pretty much the end. The argument was the afternoon before I was supposed to leave. I was supposed to leave around noon the next day. The people the couple, they were going out that evening, and without me. I mean, had been, all agreed to. They had some, I don't remember, but some date that didn't involve me. And I had other people to see. So I didn't see them that evening, and I was very upset about the whole thing. And I woke up around 3 a.m. and thought about it for a couple of hours. And by 5 o'clock or so, I realized there was really no reason. I'd been wondering, like, how am I going to face these people this morning? What are we going to say to each other? And then it dawned on me, play on words intended, that I didn't have to see them. I could just go to the airport a few hours early and never see them again. So I got up at 5 a.m. and I packed and called an Uber and left. And as it happened, the wife of the couple did wake up a few minutes before I was going to meet the car. And so I did see her in the kitchen, and I said, "I'm sorry, we had words yesterday. I really didn't come here intending to cause trouble, and I was hoping we could still be friends, but anyway, I'm leaving." And so I went out and waited for the car, and while I was doing that, I heard her husband getting up, but I got out of the house before he actually came into the kitchen, and I never saw either of them again. And that was 9 years ago. So more recently, a few months ago, the wife, over the last year, had made some friendly overtures and had and then she got mad at me, and I don't need to go into the whole story, but anyway, we sort of ended up back into not speaking to each other. So
and in a way, there is for me the basic sadness of, people who have been in each other's lives for a long time, who have enjoyed the other person's company, who seem to be getting along as people, but where, knowing some preference about the other person, some belief that the other person holds, seems to then make it impossible, or even like knowing some part of an identity of another person. Because the one thought that occurred to me early on while you were speaking for a second has this, for me, flavor or taste of Romeo and Juliet, where, right, there are two families and they have sworn to be each other's enemies, like Democrats and Republicans seem to be getting into this kind of pattern these days. And even the thought of fraternizing with the enemy, of hanging out with one of these people, is already kind of committing some kind of thought crime or some kind of crime. And how sad of a state of affairs that is. And yeah, so like like the first thing that strikes me is just the sadness of it. And then of course there are, for me, questions around, and this comes out of a conversation I've had last night with a friend who also expressed to me he had similar experiences around a different topic. He's Australian, so they don't have Republican and Democrats as the same, issue. But he ran into a similar issue where three different people have treated him in a way that for him suggested, it's going to be almost impossible to stay friends without some kind of intervention. And his description to me struck me as true on some level, where he said, people stopped treating me as a person and they started treating me just as the caricature of something that they either dislike or that they find threatening. And so they use one element of my character, of my personality, of how I present, and they use that element as an attack surface. And once they can do that, they no longer have to treat me as a human with my own thoughts and feelings, because they then have decided this person becomes a good target for something. And I'm not sure how much even motivation you feel to try to think about potential interventions, right? Where how could, to the extent that you might have this feeling of being motivated to either resuscitate or regain or revive this friendship, what could be done? And I'm not trying to put fleas in your ears, because that would be a disservice to our friendship, right?
I don't think there's anything that can be done. I think no, because I don't think there are any misunderstandings. I think
I'm the direction in which my spirit is, or like that I feel called to look into, is the direction of, can I remind the other person that I am a person too? And that no matter what they think of me as this kind of two-dimensional character that they now have labeled as, oh, Jessica is a Trump voting Republican, so I don't want to deal with her, that yes, there's no misunderstanding there. You understood this one facet of me, but if you reduce me to that, that is something that you are doing. I still am your friend. I am still a person. I'm still a human being with lots of feelings and topics and things going on in my life. But if you make your experience of me solely about me wanting to vote for Trump and being a Republican, that is your choice that you're making in this moment, and to remind people of that.
Well, I'll mute it. Well, I don't think any intervention is possible, because I think people have decided that their tribal affiliation is necessary for them, and that it's not worth violating that affiliation by fraternizing with the literal enemy. I will say that, okay, I've told you about basically 3 or 4 friendships here, and I think there were other things going on, and I don't even think the politics was necessarily determinative. I think these were all people who were tired of me for other reasons. In the case of the people I knew in California, the point in the argument where this guy really got incensed against me was, I don't remember how this came up, or I don't remember the whole discussion that had led up to this, but I had mentioned wanting a literary executor for my work. And he was offended and mocking of that it was self-aggrandizing to think of myself as requiring a literary executor. I'm a writer, and I've written a lot of stuff, and somebody, I hope, will do something with it when I'm gone, and I don't think it's that outrageous to think of having someone in that role, but I think he was genuinely offended at me politically. I don't think he was pretending about any of that. But I think the thing that set him over the edge was, he's a writer, I'm a writer. He was incensed that I took myself more seriously as a writer than he takes himself. I think that's why he got upset at the idea of a literary executor, that I had an oeuvre that anybody should have to deal with. Of course, I mean, maybe I don't rate one. I don't know. It's not up to me to tell posterity what to think of my work, but I do take myself very seriously as a writer, and I do, as an artist, it is, I suppose, self-aggrandizing, but I do compare myself to the big boys. I feel that that's, to the extent I'm competing, I'm not just competing with people I know, but I do think of myself as in relation to great artists in history. Again, it's not for me to judge. Ultimately, it's for other people to judge that. But I have to take myself that seriously as an artist, or I would never do the work that I'm doing, because you can't do that kind of work unless you think there's a point. It's, writing is painful and difficult and not something most people do for fun. In the case of the woman who told me that unless I told her I was voting for Mrs. Clinton, we couldn't talk anymore, she may well feel that way politically. I don't think she was kidding about that. But the larger context was that several years before that, she had sort of quit being my friend for a while, and then we had made up. And often in my experience, that doesn't work when you make up for a while, but whatever broke you up in the first place is still there, and then you break up again. And I think that's what happened with her, and I think it was far more to do with her resenting that I was a close friend of her husband, and she didn't want me hanging out with him anymore. Again, I mean, this is not something she would ever say, and I could be wrong, but I think she was much more concerned about my friendship with her husband than she was about who I was going to vote for. But she couldn't say that. In the third case, the person who nominally is still my friend and hasn't quit speaking to me or anything, I think she started drifting away from me 20 years ago, and I think it didn't have to do with politics. I think it had to do with she's an artist, and I started working in color, and I started getting onto what she thought of as her territory. I started doing some subjects that were subjects that she did as well, and before that, my work had been so different from hers that we weren't in any kind of competition. I still don't think we are, but I think she thought we were. And one of the things that I have trouble generally being friends with women is that women are very competitive, but they won't admit it. Well, some women aren't. I mean, not all women, but sometimes women are quite competitive, but they can't acknowledge that, and it comes out in all sorts of other ways. And I feel much more comfortable with men because if they're in competition, they're pretty open about it, and you know where you stand.
And one of the aspects that you shared that did come up for me in my thoughts is the aspect of competition. But before that, at least one, and we've talked about this some time ago, where I'm wondering whether for the people in your life who you considered friends who now are no longer friends, in your experience, that maybe for you losing them might have been a harder hit than for them, in part because the way that they conceive of their friendships in their lives is more this kind of cliquish aspect, where as long as you have a group of people that you all agree with and you are all friends, let's say because you have the same politics or the same taste in wine or whatever it might be, but there's some aspects, then you have a good number of friends. Whereas my guess about you is that it is really much more personal. And so if then someone were to decide not to be your friend, it really also hits you harder. But I think also the aspect of competition, it came up in my thoughts where...
I should interject here just for the record. I'm a writer, I'm also a photographer, so that's what I meant by working in color. I had been entirely black and white up until I went digital 20 years ago. Go ahead, I just wanted to...
Yeah, no, for me, I'm trying to think of any relatively close friends that I have who I also would describe myself in competition with. Clearly, so you and I had brunch before the recording, and it did feel to me at times that the conversation we had, yeah, we were competing a little bit about not exactly who is right, but like, who might have some arguments that can win the day or win the hour or win the minute, which for me now in my 40s is no longer a daunting prospect, but which indeed 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, would have felt much less comfortable. And I do indeed suspect that for a lot of people, the idea of having a close friend while also experiencing oneself in competition with this person in any domain might leave them feeling somewhat uncomfortable. And so I'm at least curious whether for you, the experience of competition within a friendship might not necessarily be welcome, but at least nothing in itself unpleasant or uncomfortable.
I don't know. I don't think of arguments as competitions. Maybe I should, but I think of them as people trying to get closer to the truth and comparing ideas. I guess if it's a debate, then it's competition. I do realize that some people don't enjoy that and other people do. And I try to stay away from it with the people who don't, but I don't always know. Somebody who's quite a close friend, I've been friends with her entire life. She's a little younger than I am. The last time I talked to her, a couple of weeks ago, she ended up with a very angry denunciation of people who made her feel stupid and people who were insisted on being argumentative. And she didn't name me, but she was clearly talking about me. And I was taken aback. I didn't know she felt that way. I haven't talked to her since. I really didn't know what to make of it. She's not stupid. I've never thought she was stupid in her whole life. I've never been talking to her and thought she was stupid. So I think this is something she's putting on herself, but presumably I did something to elicit that, and I don't know what. And as for being argumentative, well, again, I didn't know what to make of this whole complaint about me. And I've been thinking about it ever since. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, my intuition listening to this last experience of yours is that, well, if I look back in my own past, as I said, 10, certainly 20 and 30 years ago, the idea of getting into an argument with someone who I have, this kind of caring friendship feelings about would leave me feeling maybe in part that I did something wrong, but certainly that, I don't want to feel about an interaction with this friend in this kind of more adversarial, hostile way, and whenever that happens, that's not good. So,
but by the way, in this case, I should say, as I've experienced it anyway, the arguments I've had with her have been entirely, about politics, theoretical things, not arguments about her and me or, again, she might have experienced it differently from the way I did, but I didn't. Anyway, it was upsetting to hear all this, especially in a week when, or not a week, but, within a short time of somebody I've known for many, many years had, whom I haven't been in touch with, who doesn't live around here, but whom I assumed I was not on bad terms with. And I sent her an article that I recently had published, and she responded angrily and said she hadn't been speaking to me for the last 7 years after a conflict we had on Facebook about a related subject in 2018, and she never wanted to talk to me about anything like that again, and she was willing to talk to me about cooking or pets or something, but not about anything like that. And I told her I didn't have any pets or any plans to get any. And we sort of left it there. And anyway, around the same time, one of these people I was talking about earlier, the wife of the couple in California, the one who had made overtures to me, she got all offended again because she had been just sending me anti-Republican memes, and I had sent her back a few anti-Democrat memes. And the last one I sent her was so offensive that she said she never wanted to talk to me about politics again, and she was, bye for now. And that was weeks ago. And this was somebody who I thought I was never going to hear from again beforehand anyway. I mean, she had approached me, but anyway, I maybe she'd forgotten I was a Republican, or maybe she thought I had seen the light. I really don't understand why she got in touch and then why she got angry all over again. That one hurt less because she had never been a really close friend. The woman who said she'd been mad at me for the last 7 years had been a very close friend earlier in our lives. And again, the woman who wouldn't talk to me anymore if I wasn't going to vote for Mrs. Clinton was someone who I had considered one of my best friends for a number of years. We didn't go way, way back, but we went back a few decades. So,
yeah, my thoughts are still with what I imagine to be a really deep, deep down difference in experience when it comes to perceiving another person to be in conflict with my beliefs and values, and to what extent this creates for a person, if the other person is a friend, or I initially conceive of them as a friend, to what extent it creates this kind of deep discomfort. And just as an example, right, a hypothetical, you like to eat meat. At some point I become a vegan and become convinced veganism is the next new thing, it's the new religion, and I might even become slightly ferociously advocating for veganism. And not only, right, so, and then I may tell you, we can hang out, but let's just not talk about food, because we'll always get into how much you like bacon or whatever, and I'm just like, no, I don't want to talk about it. But to the extent that the topic then becomes, I don't know, at some point the entire society becomes food obsessed, and everyone is talking about food every day, it really becomes very difficult to avoid that topic. And if then my experience is, anyone who disagrees with me about vegan as the moral clarity of the next century, a little bit like climate change or any other topic where people have these kind of very strong feelings about that, they say, oh, I have the truth. This is the truth. This is the real way. This is the good way. This is the moral, righteous way. And the other person is just, they don't want to budge. Yeah, I can then see that for such a person, it would be difficult to avoid just like looking at you as this kind of completely unenlightened, bad person. Because how could you, if you are my friend and I've explained to you why I've become a vegan, how could you just disregard all of that? And part of it might even be my investment in my beliefs. Because I've spent so much time convincing myself that veganism is this next new thing, and then your behavior literally disregards all of my efforts. So it really almost, yeah, if for me the identity of being a vegan is such that I spent 3 years educating myself to be a vegan, this investment has to be worth it, and you are just not even willing to look at how important it is, because you think, no, I'm happy eating meat. Yeah, it might then be difficult for me to be friends with you, in part because it denies my investment in learning about veganism. And I do think some of that is going on in the political domain, where people, in fact, this is maybe one of the reasons why you and I agree that the way in which people go about any kind of corporate or public education around minority groups is backfiring, because it has this quality of, you need to invest in your education about who the oppressed groups are. And some people are even willing to do that. And once you get to that point, you have made such an investment in starting to believe all of that, that if someone denies that, it really is very, very difficult to then talk to this person as other than, hoi polloi, go away because you don't see the light.
I don't know. I can tell you about one other friend who is still a friend. She and I were roommates in college, or when I was in college. She was not in college at the time, but anyway, we were roommates for a year or so, and close friends. And then she had always been politically involved, and she was very much on the left, and she would probably still say she's a socialist. And anyway, politics did kind of drive us apart when we were in our 20s. I don't recall any specific argument, but it was kind of, I think we felt a little despairing toward each other, and we weren't in the same place. And we totally lost track of each other. I didn't know where she was for quite a few years, though I kept looking for her. And she ultimately moved to New York, and she got back in touch with me. And now we're good friends again. And she's still a socialist, and she knows I'm a Republican. And we don't talk about politics much, and none of it matters. And the reason it doesn't matter is she's been very ill. I mean, she's still an invalid, but she had several bouts of cancer and nearly died, and is lucky to have recovered as much as she did, I think. And everything's changed now. And of course, when we were roommates, we were 18 and 22. So now we're a lot older. But with her, I found it really doesn't matter, the politics, because because we're both aware of things being more important, and because we literally did lose track of each other and for years didn't know whether we'd ever see each other again. But also because I think she's capable of what you're saying, just seeing me as a human being, and I think she knows that I don't wish evil on either individuals or society. I think she thinks I think she believes that I'm a good person to, and that we differ on, ways of achieving the ideal in society. But some of the other people, the people who've quit talking to me or mostly quit talking to me, yeah, I think they genuinely do think that I want bad things for my fellow man. And I have no way of explaining to them that I don't think I do. But we come from such different perspectives. As you and I were talking about before we began recording, people differ on what they think the purpose of government is and what they think government can achieve. And a lot of people on the left congratulate themselves for being good people, for wanting the best for everyone, and even if the methods that they're trying to use or the methods they favor don't seem to be working, they still want credit for wanting the best for everybody. And so they think if you don't believe that those things are working, that you really want bad things for other people. Whereas the souls, non-anointed people, it isn't that they want bad things to happen to their fellow humans. They just have what Soul calls the tragic vision. They see certain things as impossible. They think it's impossible to make everyone equally rich or equally intelligent or equally healthy or equally educated. And a lot of people on the left believe, or at least they want to believe, or they profess to believe, that it is possible. So if you're saying it's impossible, then they don't have a category for the tragic vision, for the vision of it would be great, but it can't be. The Brecht line that I keep quoting back to you about, die Welt ist arm, der Mensch ist schlecht. The world is poor and man is evil. If you accept that, according to the left, you're a bad person for having settled for such a bleak view. And they get irritated because if you tell them these things are impossible, like, good things for everybody, well, that's threatening to them. You're telling them they're wrong. You're telling them their whole vision of the universe is wrong.
And as you're talking about this, I'm noticing for myself maybe why I have at least the ability to have compassion for people on the left and right is I can see the world as this kind of bleak reality right now, but I don't have to commit to that the world in its current form will always be the way that it is, in part because, well, life demonstrates all the time that it surpasses the conditions that it finds and is able to create something new out of nothing. that is what life does. And so I don't have to commit to, well, if the world is bad now, it has to be bad tomorrow. But I am willing to say, yeah, the world is pretty bad as it is right now. I can say that without feeling terrible or terrified.
Well, I don't think Sowell would argue that nothing can be improved, and I wouldn't argue that nothing can be improved. It's more a question of accepting that there are limitations to what can be achieved. Now, there's still a value to people being optimists. There's a value to attempting things that might be impossible, but not realizing they're impossible. You know, there are a lot of things in life that, in fact, nearly everything worthwhile in life, if we had any idea how hard it would be, we wouldn't undertake it. You know, like having children or anything. I mean, you know, writing a novel. I mean, all sorts of things look much easier in prospect. And I do think that's a good thing, because if we really saw how difficult those things are, no, I don't think anybody would ever write a novel or get married or have a kid or, you know, or even get a cat, you know.
There's still one aspect that I find myself drawn to, and this is the statement that you made about your friend who said, if you don't vote for Mrs. Clinton, we can no longer be friends. And it relates to, in my experience of it, a willingness of people to say, I'm making a choice, and I believe in the moral value of this choice so strongly that I'm willing to try to blackmail other people into the same choice over something that they value. And, you know, like this pattern is a little bit like, oh, if you don't do this and this, then I'm going to put you in jail. Or like, there's always, and I'm not saying it's always exactly the same, but there's certainly this kind of righteousness element to it. And for me, one aspect of friendship, and like this came out in other conversations, so one that I, you know, put online just the other day, I think, featured that aspect where Karen mentioned, yeah, if you have a person and you consider them a friend, one foundation is to allow them to have their own experience and not to try to manipulate them into saying, yeah, no, that's the wrong thing to feel and believe or whatever. And that once you go there, it really does make it almost impossible to still, for her, consider that a friendship, because it crosses into this boundary of, I'm still my own person and I have to make up my own damn mind. And you can tell me whatever you feel about whatever you feel. But once you start trying to extort a certain belief of me and telling me, oh, if you don't believe that, or if you don't choose this way, then we can't be friends. Well, we almost cannot be friends by definition, because you're trying to extort something from me.
Yeah, in this particular case, I don't think she was trying to extort anything, because I don't think she believed that I was going to vote any particular way because of what she said. I really think it was more of an excuse that she had wanted me out of her life for quite a while. And this came up, and it was, I mean, I don't know, but I think she would have been shocked if I'd said, like, oh yeah, I definitely plan to vote for Mrs. Clinton. Because I don't think she would have had to think of something else, you know, some other. No, but I'm serious. I'm dead serious. It was, I can't say what was going through her mind, but I really do think she had been trying to get me out of her life for quite a while. So I don't know. I mean, basically, I hardly have any friends left, and
And I'm now
I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, I'm at least wondering. So one of the groups that, well, it's not maybe a group of friends, but at least a social group that I know you are a part of is the specific group of National Review readers that have a Facebook social group.
Yeah, we have a private Facebook group.
And I'm curious whether you've tried to, given at least that within that group of people, any collisions around politics are probably much less likely to occur than if, well, in New York, it is a liberal city.
Well, most of these people aren't in New York.
Yeah. And so maybe one of the things that I'm curious about, whether for you that is a critical aspect of friendship, is to actually have in-person interactions with people. And that if you don't have that, it might be difficult to even consider someone a genuine friend or something.
Well, yeah, no, I have, since getting to know these people online, I've met a few of them in real life, but not very many because they are scattered all over the country and a few of them in other countries. But we're definitely not all in agreement about things. And in fact, there are a few of the people who've been so obnoxious and doctrinaire that a couple of people have started new subgroups to try to get, and not so much in competition, but just to get the people they liked without the few trolls. And there's been a lot of people blocking each other, and there's a lot of discussion just about that. And for some reason, I have not yet been inspired to block anybody. I do agree that the obnoxious people, I find them also completely obnoxious, but I just mostly don't ever engage with them. And I do mind that they seem to be driving other people whom I like out of the group. However, online friends are not the same as people in real life. And of course, I value my real life friends more highly, even though I have gotten to know some of these people online pretty well within the limitations of never having met them. But I joined the group in 2018, so some of these people, and we see a lot of each other online. A lot of us check in every day. So in a sense, I've been hanging out with some of these people for like 7 years. So I definitely consider them friends, and some of them I very much wish I could meet, or hope I will someday. But they don't take the place of people I know in real life. And I do consider real life to be different from being online. And I wish I had more friends in real life. Also, one thing that one appreciates more and more the older one gets is the old friends. They can't be replaced. You can't replace people you've known since 7th grade or freshman year, or no matter how much you like them. It's a different category. So that's why I regret losing some of these people a lot. Some of the people who weren't necessarily my close friends ever, but just the fact that I have known them since college and have seen the whole arc of their lives, and or gotten to know their families or whatever. It's and that's another thing. I mean, there's another person whom I hope is still one of my best friends, who quit speaking to me for a couple of years recently. Literally, totally quit speaking to me. and then got over it, and now we're speaking again. But so far, his wife and family don't seem to be part of that renewed friendship. And so while I'm very glad to have this one guy back in my life, more than I can express, I was friends with his brother and sister and wife and many children, and I miss all of them.
Which, as you're talking about this, I'm really noticing the value of being able to maybe something like relive shared memories or something where I have shared with people experiences, like a college roommate or whatever it might have been, a trip to Africa 30 years ago. And to the extent that I then have this experience, oh, I did this with this person and we had a great time, but now we are no longer able to talk about it because of some stupid worldly fact. That seems, it's just painful. It's just painful to know that some of my significant memories that really are valuable as I do this kind of rearview mirror review of what happened in my life, but I cannot share them with the people that I had the experiences with because of some stupid other reason. That is just painful. And again, I'm noticing, for me, it's primarily sad that we are living in a time, era, or culture where we don't seem to fully recognize just how much the culture demands of us to have these silos of beliefs. Because somehow I'm fully aware, for instance, that when I was growing up in our neighborhood, between my parents and the neighbors, there were definitely quite some differences politically when it came to which candidates they might support or which parties they would vote for, or even the political positions. But it would never have prevented them to say, we don't want to be good neighbors with these people because we can hang out, we have kids the same age, we party together, we went on many trips, like taking long, like more than just like walks, but really kind of, German Wanderung, where you literally walk for hours from our town where I grew up to like a town 15, 20 miles over. And we would do this in an entire day on a weekend with 3, 4, 5 families, and then eat at the destination. And then someone in the morning had driven a couple of cars over, so that at the end of the day, we could all just ride back in one go. And all of these things had been arranged between all of the families, and it would never be a problem. So all of these political differences back then existed, and people knew that about one another, but it just wasn't a problem, similar to between you and your socialist friend with the experience of cancer. And how sad it is that we seem totally blind to how, and I don't want to put this on technology as much as it is supported by technology, right? Social media supports this siloing, but the social media is just a tool, right? Because ultimately, I think it is about, can I get people to buy certain things, buy certain political opinions, buy certain parties' opinions? Can I get people to vote? Can I get people to believe a certain thing at the cost of those people's social lives? And that is happening. It is just happening, and no one seems to be particularly, well, I wouldn't say no one, because Jonathan Haidt is definitely someone who talks about it, and I know Jay Van Bevel from NYU is talking about it. So there are people who talk about it. But where much of the population seems just unable to not let that happen, because it is just so out of the consciousness that there might be a choice where, no, you can't choose to remain friends with a person who vehemently disagrees with you if you so choose.
it's, I know a lot of people blame social media. I don't. I think social media are just an extension of social life, and I do think social media are, sure, in some ways unique, but I'm always seeing the similarities. Like, I know people who fear Facebook because they fear that algorithms will feed them stuff, and to me that seems like a very silly complaint. I mean, I'm on Facebook. I'm active on Facebook. I subscribe to, or follow some left-leaning pages and some right-leaning pages. I get fed plenty of left stuff because all I had to do was start following Democratic Socialists of America and a couple of other things, and so I get people from all sides, and also the people I know in real life are mostly on the left, and I follow them and so forth. So I don't see my own views as being siloed because of social media. I see them as being expanded. I'm fascinated by social media because people are somewhat honest on it a lot of the time, and I use it for my research to figure out what people are thinking. I'm also aware that people always fear new modes of communication, and there was a time when printing was seen as threatening because anybody would be able to read, and people would be able to read the Bible for themselves and not just get what their priest told them and things like that. There were, this is before your time, but there was a book that was quite influential in the 50s called Seduction of the Innocent, and it was about comic books and how terrible comic books were for children. There was another book from, I guess, the early 60s called The Hidden Persuaders, and it was about how advertising controlled your brain. And I just don't, to me, people who are unintelligent or ignorant tend to believe a lot of things that aren't true, and we're all uneducated and ignorant compared to somebody else, and it's our job to get more information and think more, not cut off the sources. But anyway, so the people I know who are scared of Facebook controlling their minds are not taking into account that newspapers have a particular point of view, and TV stations and any medium is going to lean a given way and focus on material that supports that point of view. And it's up to you to look at more than one source.
Just as, well, with these recordings, I want to maybe make the point having friends is better than not having friends. So I clearly have a perspective here. One point that came up for me as you were talking, and I'm curious now just to get your opinion. And so maybe just briefly, you and I are in a three-way Facebook conversation with another friend fairly regularly. And I think within that three-way thread, I've made a similar point a couple of times, but I suspect one reason why social media did have the impact that it has, or does have that impact, is that 50, 60, 70 years ago, a lot of the effort that people put out into their daily activities were still directed at, well, for lack of a better word, some sort of survival. I just needed to put out a lot of effort to even get my act together, to feed my family, and to care about the next generation, and to really structure and organize my life around very, very existential needs. And to the extent that that has fallen away, and more people can actually be, for better or for worse, realistically be told, well, even if you are not super productive, you will survive quite fine. Somehow the society will give you some version of housing and some version of like food stamps or something. And I do suspect that without that ever being made very explicit, so this is not part of any school education, right? It's not printed anywhere. But I think people feel that if they want to have a fulfilled life, a purpose, it cannot be just this, what work am I best suitable for to feed myself? And if I feel that way, well, then my imagination will go, okay, what can fulfill the meaning in my life? Why not politics? Why not activism? Why not taking a stance about a topic and putting my energy, my life energy in there? And to the extent that I do that, because it becomes then political rather than personal, yeah, I'm setting myself up to these conflicts.
Yeah, I think there are various things going on there. There's been, I think most sociologists would agree that, or most observers would agree that in this country there's been a pretty steady decline in religious affiliation over the last 70 years. And that politics has taken the place of it. And there are many surveys that will show that people who in 1960 would have been upset if their Presbyterian child had married a Baptist, and now they don't care about that, but they care if we're Democrats and you're marrying a Republican. And the people I know online, by the way, a lot of them in the group you were talking about, the National Review group, a lot of these people are Christians of various denominations. And they know that I'm an atheist Jew, and I have never felt any hostility or exclusion or anything like that from these folks, ever. And people don't discuss religion much, but it comes up because a lot of us are older, just people in this group often ask others to pray for them. You know, I'm having cancer surgery next week, or my husband is. And other people in the group say, yes, I will pray for you. Now, I don't say that because I don't pray, but I will say, you know, wishing you a speedy recovery, thinking of you, whatever. But what I mean is, the Christians are well aware that I'm not a Christian. And I really have never felt the slightest difficulty, exclusion, awkwardness, hostility, nothing. Now, I don't know why that is. Some of these people are quite religious. I think part of that is an attitude that there is always hope until the last moment, and for all I know, they've never said so, but possibly some of these people are praying for me that I will accept Christ as my Savior before it's too late. And I really find that a beautiful sentiment. I'm not offended by that. But anyway, what I was going to say is not only has there been a loss of religious affiliation, but there have been many books and studies about just loss of affiliation generally, and, you know, bowling alone, that kind of thing. People don't join clubs or organizations as much as they used to. They're less interested in a lot of kinds of volunteering, et cetera, all kinds of social groups that people don't participate in. And not only that, but I think we know that the family is also quite beleaguered, and there are fewer families, people not getting married, people having children without getting married and only planning to provide one parent to their children, and all of those things have been weakening social bonds. And then on top of that, although a lot of people don't like this idea, but I think it's pretty well proved that diversity weakens social bonds, and that people who live in a place like New York, surrounded by people of other races, languages, religions, customs, there are lower levels of trust. I'm not in that world, but I have read more than once that among Orthodox Jews in the diamond business, a handshake is as good as a contract. I mean, a handshake deal is absolutely inviolable. Well, that's a very high trust society. I remember I used to live in Chinatown before I moved to Tribeca, and I remember the day we were moving. For various reasons, we postponed our move a day, but we had our phone cut off the day before because this was in the era of landlines. So we had no phone, and I needed to make a phone call, and I asked a young woman working in the Chinese food warehouse next door if I could use her phone, and she wouldn't let me. Now, she'd seen me every day for months and months. She knew I lived on the block. She didn't know who I was, but I mean, I had to be familiar, and I told her, I lived next door. But I was around eyes, and she wasn't going to let me use her phone. That's a kind of low trust example. So I hope I'm not making too much out of that one anecdote, but I'm fairly sure that if I'd been Chinese, she would have let me use her phone. Although, of course, I can't prove that. Anyway, I think all of these things, loss of trust, loss of community, loss of all sorts of social ties, has led people to put their desire for that kind of belonging into politics. And that's why they feel it so strongly. That's why they feel like they must be in the tribe with the other Democrats or whatever. And a huge amount of what I see on Facebook among the left-leaning people I know is just posting memes of things they believe. The same sort of drawings and statements go round and round and round. And as one meme said a while back, I post these things on my wall not to try to convince people, but to tell people who think like I do that I'm there thinking like them. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's the sentiment. But anyway, I see that all the time. I mean, I see people, various retired teachers I know are fond of memes about how the rich aren't paying their fair share. The people who post these memes, they have no idea about what percentage of taxes are paid by the rich or any of that. They have no idea what they're talking about. But they post these things because they got it from another retired teacher, and they sort of believe this. It's convenient to believe it. It's certainly a great... I think that's a big myth that the rich aren't paying their fair share and we could pay for everything if we tax billionaires harder. But I know even very well-educated and otherwise sophisticated people who sincerely believe that. But anyway, I mean, all these people, they post this over and over, and I see this, variations of these sentiments constantly. And these people, it's true, they're not trying to convince anyone else. They're not saying anything they know or have read about. They're just putting out a flag that's basically saying, don't kick me out, I'm one of you. We're united against the enemy. And the enemy isn't even the rich. The enemy is Republicans or Trump fans or whatever. And I think it speaks to tremendous isolation and alienation that they feel the need to post these things. Because if they felt secure, why would they even bother with it? I mean, why are they, why post that as opposed to the other stuff they post, which is, this was our vacation, this is my dog,
Yeah, in my speculation, I can think of at least some other reasons. Like one would be similar to in the past, maybe people might have posted much more about their favorite sports teams. And it's not so much where if I don't post about my sports team, I feel insecure, but it's really just, part of it is kind of and maybe this is sublimating where you also said it is a form of competition where you don't have to publicly acknowledge that it's a competition, right? But you can at least be very competitive. You can be very pro my team against the other team in a my team is better kind of way, where, yeah, people probably need some of that in their lives. And it is very sad that this may have also moved away from sports more and more into politics, in part because politics has this, tendency to blow up into all kinds of, ultimately street violence.
It's also a sport in the sense that there's a competition and one side wins and one loses.
Sure, but the violence
but
related
people don't even, with the team loyalty, it isn't even that their team is better. There are people who say, I'm for the Jets. They, I love the Jets. They lose all the time. They're terror. I mean, I don't even know if they're the bad team, but I mean, I hear like the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. They're always talking about their favorite teams who are apparently not very good teams, but that just sort of makes these hosts, love them all the more because it's our guys. So yeah, I think it's exactly the same sentiment of people feel threatened by the other team, whatever it is, and the more threatened they are, the more it's important to advertise that you're on the right team.
But what you just said at least made me also wonder if that might be one of the reasons why, despite the fact that at the moment my impression of polling about democratic platform and policies is that it's not going very well, but why similarly, just as people may still cling on to their favorite team even though it hasn't won the World Series in quite a while, may just want to stick to their team just because it is their team. And so like, these are my guys and I'm going to stick with it no matter what. And this loyalty to the brand of the team is ultimately even more important than winning.
Yes, there's I don't know if you know the British sitcom Keeping Up Appearances. Anyway, I just remember one scene where there's this couple who've been married for 40 years by this point or something, and the husband is saying that it was a great blow to him because before they got married, the woman had never confessed that she followed Arsenal. That was her team. So this had been, the tragedy of their marriage, that they followed different soccer teams. But yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that a great deal because I've been thinking about the pandemic. I've been writing this long piece about the pandemic, and the aspect that interests me the most is the teams and the people who are quite open about it. I wear a mask to show that I'm not a Republican. I mean, people actually came out and said that, and all the ideas that that went along with it, of which are really ideas that occur in many religions, of the clean and the unclean, and the to become clean always requires some kind of ritual or practice, and how people I knew who aren't religious and actually take a fair amount of pride in being not religious because they think they're more intelligent and more advanced than people who believe in religion, but nonetheless they seem to not recognize that they have the need for the in-group and the out-group. And this occurred to me really forcefully in a couple of situations where there were social gatherings where people made me test for COVID before I showed up. And one of these gatherings was a party that I had wanted to attend, and when the last minute the venue of the party was changed from outdoors to indoors, so suddenly there was this requirement to test, and at first I refused because this was in the fall of 21, and I was feeling like somebody's got to start taking a stand against this stuff and just not playing along. So I told the hostess, no, I'm not going to test. She said, well, you can't come. And I said, okay. And then actually I discussed it with my online friends, the National Review Group, and I told them, like, here's this party that I had planned to go to, that I in fact want to go to, but and ultimately I did cave, and I bought some tests and I tested and I went to the party. But the way I could accept doing this was when it dawned on me, because that was the first time it had really hit me, that it was a religion, and that it wasn't about whether or not I had COVID. It was about my friend giving the party was requiring that this was her religion and this was her ritual, and that was the way I should understand it. And so just as when I was little and we were in Spain and my mother explained to my sister and me that we needed to cover our heads before we went into the cathedral because that was what one did. And we were fine with that, and it wasn't like we thought we were Catholics by any means, or that we thought it was even being religious. We merely understood that this was respecting someone else's religion. So once I understood that my friend had a religion and was asking me to respect it but not to convert, that it became okay for me to, do the test, even though I still think, in a sense, I was right to not give in to this stuff, but in another way, I think I was right to cave because there was no arguing with it. And that was the other aspect of it being a religion to her, was when I realized, I didn't articulate all this in my head at that moment, but I realized that that's what it is. I wasn't going to convert her to the idea that COVID was no longer a big threat and that this testing stuff was ridiculous. So, it was just, it was her party, her rules, and I could, play along or not.
Which at least, there's now two aspects that for me converge back to really friendship, which is...
Oh, let me tell you one more thing, by the way. After I had put up this question and we had discussed it in the NR group, Jim Garrity, the writer who occasionally visits us in the group, he said, you should give her a card that says, you're the kind of friend I'd stick something up my nose for. And I did. I made her a card of one of my nice flower pictures, and I did write on it exactly that, and I gave it to her. I don't know whether it amused her, but anyway. Jim, if you're listening, I did it.
Nice shout out. Yeah, so for me, the aspect, both friendship as the kind of bond people can enter into that has the potential to bridge very far away cultures, just like the Montagues and the Capulets, thank you. Right, where
Sharks and Jets, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where people who are bound to disagree with one another and hate one another can overcome this if they meet one another as individuals rather than as members of their group. And how tragic it is that so much of our culture these days is implying, no, the way to meet people is as members of groups. This is a member of this group, this is a member of that group, and to think of them that way rather than, no, this is a person. Meet them as a person and then see what happens. And I'm then with this last bit of COVID and like thinking of it as a religion, because as much as I'm sure you have lots of disagreements about any kind of science that has been done to find how bad COVID is and how best to treat it and the efficacy of masks or anything having to do with the science, is to appreciate whatever a person believes is effective in dispelling threats, right? If a Catholic thinks putting your hand into a bucket of water and putting some of it on your head and on your chest and on your shoulders in a specific order, that will protect them from evil. You don't have to argue with them about the efficacy of their beliefs. As long as you can say, yes, when I come into your house, into your party, and you're asking me to do this thing, if it doesn't kill me, I'm happy to do that, not even to say your beliefs are correct, but that I respect that you have those beliefs. And that to the extent that it is your party and it doesn't kill me and it doesn't cost me that much, right? I wouldn't buy a Ferrari just to be in a club, but putting a little of holy water on my face and my chest and shoulders doesn't kill me, so I'm going to do this as a sign of respect. But the reason that I'm doing it is not because I'm caving to your religion, but because of our friendship. And similarly, I suspect that with the person who's a socialist that you're still friends with, that the same agreement lies at the bottom of it, where, yes, the other person has beliefs that I disagree with, but I will respect that you hold them for our friendship's sake. And if people could find their way back to that, yeah, I have a hope that our lives could be better. And I think this is one of the reasons why I feel interested in these conversations, is to figure out what exactly is keeping people from thinking that way. Because I do believe that is a bit of a choice. You can choose to think of friendship as a potential bridge and then just say, why don't I, to the extent that I know people from other cultures, from other religions, from other sets of beliefs that might get into hard conflict with mine, why don't I use my friendship with them as a bridge rather than the other way around, where the sets of beliefs have to trump everything and cutting off all friends that don't agree with me and then being actually very lonely?
Well, I'll tell you that what made me change my mind about going to this friend's party. Somewhere in this discussion online, somebody, I don't even remember how it came up, but the idea of if something happened to your friend, you wouldn't want to leave it there. I mean, basically, I started thinking, this woman, this is somebody else whom I have been friends with literally her whole life. And I thought, well, what if I skipped this party and then she died? And then do I really want my last memory of this relationship to be I was pissy about her party? No, I don't want that.
Can you think of anything else at the moment, or is this maybe about it? We've talked for about an hour and a half now.
If you have other questions, I can go on, but I don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's still one topic that I had considered talking about with you, which is the relationship that I know that you have with your sister, who has very different politics, and how family and friendship intersect. And at least I suspect that it has been helpful that you are more than friends, that you are sisters, and that knowing that about one another provides at least some ultimate bottom or basis or backdrop where, like a friendship that is just a chosen relationship. Yeah, I can at least understand that people may have less principle. You know, just like a capital on which they can just like fall back on and say, yeah, but at least we will always be sisters. Whereas if you can choose and say, I'm no longer friends with this person, you can actually really voluntarily make that choice. But you wouldn't be able to say, I mean, maybe you could say she's no longer my sister, but like deep down, I think you would still know that she is.
Yeah, well.
And vice versa, obviously.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think if we weren't sisters, I imagine she would have cut me out of her life a long time ago. She just barely tolerates having me in her life as it is. So.
And now I want to push back a little bit, because if I imagine Diana sitting here, I don't believe that she would just like let this last remark go uncommented. Because my and on
I'm
my way
assuming
here,
she's never going to hear this conversation. So
on my way here, I was listening to a couple of times, because I recently, you know, I'm very out of date with popular music, and so I literally just a few weeks ago discovered a song recorded maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where as part of the lyrics, it's like, I've been doing my darndest to put your needs, whatever your things are in life, I've done my darndest to put that first, but I've had it and I'm giving up. And you can't even see all the effort that I've been doing, because I've been not very successful in keeping up the relationship. For whatever reason, we're so stuck in this situation where neither of us can think of a way of making it better, but we're both doing our best to make it work as much as we can. And so my hunch is that you would say that about your approach to her, and my hunch is that she would say that about her approach to you, but that from the other perspective, it always looks like the other person is not doing enough. And that is, it's a very simple mistake to make, because you don't fully understand how exactly the other person is exerting effort.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I certainly do feel that I'm doing everything I can. Yeah, I suppose she would probably say that about herself. But I don't know. I mean, I think I was telling you recently that one thing I would like to say to her, and I haven't, is, you know, don't give me any more gadgets for presents. The present I want from you is for you to tear up the list in your head of all the things I'm not allowed to mention around here.
And yeah, which that brings me back to where I really have a suspicion that for some people, the experience of a disagreement in itself signals to them something is wrong. And for some people, that is very difficult, because they would rather have this list of topics and feel, let's talk about cats and casseroles cameras and
Yeah.
Whatever. Can't think of any more words with ka. Anyway,
Conservative, Christ.
Right. Let's talk about safe topics and feel good about one another.
Carnivores.
Carnivores, yeah. Carnival. But let's not get into dispute. Whereas, and again, Jessica, I have been there in my past where if I, for instance, for a moment imagine, and because now I could have literally, if someone came to me and said like, you're gay and gays are the worst people of the world, I could just be like, please tell me why you think that is. But 15 years ago, 10 years ago, probably 5 years ago, I would have been like, I cannot have a conversation with this person because they think whatever they think, and I can't even listen to that because it would be such a painful experience in my psychology about like, okay, here is a person and I want to listen to them, but what they say creates this kind of explosion in my experience, and so I have to step away from that. And now I can separate all of these experiences a bit more and be like, yeah, I have an experience of somewhere inside of me something is exploding, but it is my explosion, right? The other person is just like using words and the explosion is happening inside of me. And so I need to figure out how to deal with my explosive material. And I can still say, yeah, and tell me more. It's almost, and I've like learned to make this a bit of a practice to really find out what is it that makes me explode on the inside. And then, okay, where are the landmines and how do I diffuse them so that it becomes safer to tell me things? And for a lot of people, I suspect they have the experience, no, the other person is bringing the explosives to the party. And so they want to keep the other person away. They do not understand that the explosives are already on your inside, and someone else is just like, yeah, they're putting them, alight. They're starting the fuse, but it is your own explosives. And yeah, we talked earlier about public education. That for me would be a huge boon, I think it is, right, to public education, to tell people each time when you have this experience, ouch, someone said something and I feel really bad about what they said. Sure, the other person said something that set you off. There's no argument there. But they set you off, right? They didn't actually throw a grenade. They threw a match. Because the explosive is in your soul.
Yeah, I don't know the source of that people nowadays feel so threatened being in the presence of disagreement. And that's what I noticed that I didn't notice 20 years ago, that just the very thought, like, I voted for Trump, as you know, I'm not a fan particularly, but why, I don't understand. I know a lot of people who feel literally threatened being in the same room as somebody they knew voted for Trump. And if I don't know the source of why they feel so threatened, and I also don't know where this idea came from that they have a right to never feel threatened. Well, because that's the other thing. I mean, because I thought, I thought the way the world worked was that people didn't agree about everything.
I have a strong hunch, and it is related but not identical to my hunch about the purpose of life. But if I imagine, for instance, in my family, wider family, I have aunts and uncles who really more or less lived off the land. And if you are able to provide for yourself, so either you hunt or you fish or you sow and reap, whatever you do, you don't have to worry about your livelihood. But how many people these days do that, right? Hardly anyone. So everyone ultimately is dependent for their livelihood on other people. And to the extent that I experience other people disagree with me, yeah, at some point I will get the, I think, unconscious feeling, what if I'm no longer safe? Because, wow, I need groceries and whatever, and electricity, water, everything is being brought to me by other people. And if I piss people enough off, I'm toast. And this is an undeniable fact, I would say, of social life in the 21st century. And so I have very much understanding that 100 years ago, in a much more still, especially in rural settings, agricultural society, people could piss their neighbor off all they wanted politically, because at the end of the day, you walked your own ways and you had your own milk and meat and potatoes and the other side had theirs, and you just didn't have to worry about that. And that has changed, right? The reality now is, yes, if you piss people off enough, you are ostracized. Look at what happens on social media, and that you are now prone to lose your job if you say the wrong thing. And so really, your survival has become much more dependent on not having the wrong opinions.
I think that's true up to a point, but I also think that might be more illusory about the past, because I think it may be the other way around, that living in a diverse society, we're actually coming up against a greater variety of ideas. And, heretics to the church were, even in agrarian societies, weren't that welcome, I don't think.
Yeah, if you go further back into the past, I agree, because the structures were such that if you pissed off your landlord, the person who owned the land, you would just be like, not heard
general,
of again.
I mean, you would be guilty of heresy. I mean, heresy was a taboo by itself. It was just, so.
But especially for me in this country, and one of the reasons why, really, for the longest time, ever since I became, I would say, an adult, like at the end of my high school year, I knew I wanted to come to this country, from Germany to America, in part because I felt there is no heresy laws here. And people left.
The joke's on you.
Yeah, to some extent. Because I felt that people left Europe behind for this new land to say, we no longer want to feel beholden to our master's beliefs. And, like freedom of religion for me is primarily about, you don't get to dictate what I need to believe to feel secure in my livelihood, right? The pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, all of these things, is for me a matter of a constitutional right, in the sense that certainly government won't do anything to restrict those things for me in a way that I have to fear pursuing one of those three things will be abridged by the government. And we're now getting, I think, dangerously close to people thinking, no, actually, we should do that because, yeah, we are feeling more and more suspended in some sort of, no one knows exactly how the future looks like, and everything seems to be getting so insecure, and the only way to feel halfway my life is not going to go down the cliff is to pretend, let's agree with the biggest group of people that I can find, and then just blend in there, and as long as I don't stick out my neck too far, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think many people do feel that way, and I think, and there's many kinds of heresy. I mean, look at Colombia the last couple of years. People being harassed and kept off campus because they were suspected of being Zionists. It's horrifying for a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously, it's horrifying to me as a Jewish faculty brat who was brought up to believe that there had been anti-Semitism in American academia, but that was sort of gone by 1965 or so. And it was gone for a few decades, and now it's back. And also the idea that being a Zionist was even relevant at Columbia, because Columbia is in New York, and like how, it's one thing to protest the Vietnam War if it's your country involved in the war. And when I was in college, my friends were in danger of being drafted, and it was a very present threat. Whereas I don't know how many people at Columbia are genuinely threatened by the existence of Israel one way or the other. It seems remote, but they seem to think Zionists are an active threat to them.
I feel that if we explore this further, this might be another few hours.
So I'm content to bring this to a close.
Okay. Jessica, it has been a delight. In part,
Thank you.
Really, this is my first in-person recording, so that was fun. Seeing you is fun. And I feel, and I've mentioned this to you on a few occasions, that I certainly have, which is for me one of the major reasons for me personally to seek out new friends, is to expand the directions in which I feel comfortable thinking. And as we noticed earlier, there are still quite some disagreements about what we can get into a debate into, and yet I feel very certain that the friendship with you will last. Just because
I hope so.
we've gone through one or two moments. I remember, during the first Trump campaign election cycle, when I think it got a little more heated at moments, but we've gone through there, and so at the moment I wouldn't even be able to think of any topic that would still try to where I felt even remotely convinced it is worth giving up our friendship. So I'm very glad we're friends.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to have you as a friend, and I'm honored that you wanted me to participate in this particular project, and thank you for not making me appear on camera.
Absolutely. Until next time. Bye-bye.